Barbie, you're beautiful. You make me feel my Barbie doll is really real.
Following World War II, Barbie was introduced in 1959 and would soon revolutionize the toy industry as the best-selling doll of all time. Inventor Ruth Handler noticed the small variety of toys for children, especially girls, and created a doll with many jobs and hobbies to boost the confidence of young females while also encouraging them to follow their dreams. Not only was Handler a leader in the toy industry, she was also a leader as a businesswoman and had an incredible influence on the development of modern advertising and branding, creating a legendary legacy for herself, her husband, and their company Mattel. Ruth Handler was born on November 4, 1916 in Denver, Colorado. Growing up, she never felt a connection with either of her parents, both of whom were Polish immigrants. Because of this, she was raised by her sister and brother-in-law. Later in life, she married her husband, Elliot Handler, and together they moved to Los Angeles, where they purchased a small garage workshop that would soon be known by the public as the biggest toy company in the world. On May 21, 1941, Ruth gave birth to her first child, who she named Barbara. Throughout Barbara's childhood, Ruth continued to work and travel, leaving her at home with Elliot. While Ruth was aspiring to build the biggest toy company in America, in 1955 Walt Disney offered her the chance to become the main advertiser for a new program called the Mickey Mouse Club. For the first time in history, networks recognized that a children's market existed. Ruth was the sole sponsor of the new program, and after noticing the success of it, Mattel began to focus more on making toys and purchasing commercial time of their own. Throughout Mattel's history, innovation and toy design has been evident in the products created, and the historic toys produced in the early years of the company serve as a reminder of how creative the people of Mattel have been, and why today it is the largest company in the world. Mattel's first toy was known as the Burp Gun, the first cap gun introduced to the American market, and Handler paid $2,500 for an ad that didn't work, while the Mickey Mouse Club was a dominating success.
He never misses with that burp gun. And it's so simple to play with. The safety catch keeps it from firing while Billy winds it. Then he closes the breech.
Despite the unanticipated failure of the burp gun, Handler persevered through. Soon after, other toy companies began to copy her aggressive use of television advertising and persistence, which sped up television and drove a major change in sales for Mattel.
Wherever toys are sold, you can tell it's Mattel. It's swell.
Barbie was first introduced at the American Toy Fair in February of 1959. Prior to the release, Ruth thought of the idea for Barbie while watching her daughter, Barbara, playing with paper dolls. Barbara's name also inspired the name Barbie. Handler noticed that all of the toys created for young girls encouraged them to play the role of a mother, and thought that as her daughter grew older and began to imitate adult conversation, she needed a three-dimensional representation to play with. Ruth shared her idea of a doll with womanly features with her husband and the predominantly male executive team at Mattel, but they refused, saying that it would be too expensive to produce and the retail price would have to be higher than the consumer would be willing to pay. After returning from a trip to Europe, she again approached them with the idea and brought with her a Lily doll, a German doll produced in the mid-50s. Lily, however, was modeled after a practically pornographic caricature in a German comic strip, which was extremely different than the innocent image that Ruth wanted to portray, and she believed that it was Mattel's job to create that. The team eventually came to an agreement to create a doll that girls would look up to. For Barbie's first advertising agency, she was not a doll, rather a living teenager that young girls would aspire to imitate. When Barbie made her first debut on television after the Toy Fair in March of 1959 as a teen fashion model, it was an uncharted zone for toy advertisement. Only once in the commercial was Barbie called a doll. Throughout, she was referred to as Barbie, a girl who dances, parties, and even changes clothes. Despite the fact that an extra $125,000 was devoted to Barbie's launch prior to the Toy Fair, buyers were still worried about Barbie's sex appeal. Therefore, the spring of 1959 was grim for Handler because the Barbie doll had failed to catch on the way she had predicted and hoped. Thankfully, as schools began to close for the summer, Mattel began receiving calls from buyers with a high demand for Barbie dolls. Demands for the new doll skyrocketed as the effect of the television advertising propelled girls to beg their parents for the newest doll. The buyers who had been uninterested at the toy fair were now yearning to get the dolls. Barbie soon became an international phenomenon, the best-selling doll in the world and one of the best-selling toys of all time. Despite the media criticizing her doll, Handler realized her own vision and created both a controversial icon and a successful business. She had given girls something she believed they wanted and needed, and they proved her right. In 1961, Handler decided it would be beneficial for Mattel to create a boy version of Barbie who they named after her son, Ken. The Ken doll was a huge addition to the success of sales in the toy industry and helped shape the future of their business.
Special night. And then it happened. She met Ken. And somehow she knew that she and Ken would be going together. So now Mattel brings you Ken, Barbie's boyfriend.
15 years later, Ruth became the executive vice president of Mattel, and that fall, Barbie dolls were available in 22 varieties, and their ranks were expanding due to new clothes and accessories, as well as new dolls. Ruth rejected sexist norms in her business life, but still felt the conflict of challenging conformist ideas about women. She had no desire to dictate the fantasies girls played out while playing with Barbie, but trusted that if she delivered the doll to the girls' hands, they would create their own make-believe world. Ruth's rise in a corporate world dominated by men made her a target. However, most of the men she worked with had never seen a woman like her. Despite the circumstances, Ruth found it honorable to be the only female operating in a business world comprised of men, as it was a form of power and she was ascending business heights unimaginably. She had been running Mattel for 15 years, and her ambition was still clear. She believed in her marketing talent, her originality, and her willingness to operate outside of the box. After 1960, there was no denying that every decision was planned and approved by Ruth herself, and by the late 1960s, Mattel had more women executives than any other toy company in the world. In 1970, Ruth Handler's life took a turn for the worst. For years, she had been experiencing minor lumps in her breast, and she was finally diagnosed with breast cancer. For women in 1970, having a mastectomy was a brutality that was not to be shared with anyone, but the surgery was her only hope. 5 weeks after the surgery, Handler returned to work, but found that she was so shaken by the physical and emotional toll of the cancer that she could not work. Tensions arose throughout Mattel, but Ruth continued to stay strong. In 1973, President Richard Nixon created an advisory committee on the economic role of women and made Ruth one of the 16 inaugural members. After that, she began giving speeches about the challenges of consumerism and safety in the business place, in which she spoke about what she had learned throughout her business endeavors. Due to false accusations made against Handler and her husband Elliot, they were forced to resign from the company. After the trauma Ruth went through, she decided to invent a new product called the Nearly Me, a prosthetic breast for women who had undergone a mastectomy. She called it the Nearly Me because it was not her, but a greater improvement over what was available. Her goal was to remove the shame from the surgery and empower women to feel confident in themselves, because by 1977, over 2 million women had undergone the surgery and lost their self-esteem. Once again, Ruth revolutionized not only her genius product, but its marketing. She lectured about the importance of defining a need and targeting consumers, saying that every product has to have a reason to be. By 1977, Handler began selling her breasts from a small store in Los Angeles, advertising Nearly Me with the slogan, "The best man-made breasts are made by women," and eventually the product was sold in big-name stores such as Bloomingdale's and Saks. In June of 1994, Handler's son Ken passed away after a long struggle through HIV. As difficult as it was, she believed that there is nothing like adversity and hardship to make one grow. Throughout her life, Handler received tons of industry honors, but the most prestigious came in 1989 when she was inducted into the Toy Industry Hall of Fame. Her reemergence as a respected leader in the industry had been gradual but steady. On April 27, 2002, Ruth passed away, but in her last decade, she summed up her life by saying, "I feel like I have lived 3 lives. In my first life, we did it our way. In my second, we did it their way. And in my third, I did it my way." Both of Ruth's products encouraged females to be confident in themselves, and her marketing techniques revolutionized modern advertising methods and branding. Other toy companies, having seen how successful Mattel was, recognized that in order to be competitive in the toy business, they would have to adapt to the new modern advertising and marketing creativity. Today, Handler is remembered as the leader she was, creating the most popular toy in American history, as well as promoting women's place in the business world by creating intelligent advertising and promotional techniques.
Let's go party.